Hello anatomy students. Today we are going to be finishing our skin notes. So we are going to be finishing the integumentary system today. So when we left off, we had gone through the general functions and properties of the tissues of the integumentary system. Today we are going to mostly go through the layers. So your integument has 3 layers. The epidermis is the most superficial. That is the stuff that you see. The dermis is deep to the epidermis. It is a thicker layer. It is vascular. That is where we're going to have things like hair follicles. There are going to be nerve endings in this. There are going to be glands within the dermis. The deepest layer is the subcutaneous layer. This is a layer of mostly adipose tissue. So there's fat, there's also more major blood vessels. So your more major blood vessels are going to run in the subcutaneous layer. There are minor capillaries that are going up into your dermis. So now we're going to go through the layers of the epidermis. So your epidermis is divided down into 5 distinct layers. Now, some parts of your skin have 5 layers of your epidermis, other parts have 4. The palm of my hand has 5 layers. This is what we call thick skin. It's a rather intuitive name. The skin on the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet is thicker. Anywhere where you have friction ridges, anywhere where you have prints, that is thick skin. Where on the top of my hand, I don't have any fingerprints, that is thin skin. So the layers of the epidermis from most superficial to the deepest, you lost his heart. So the layers of the epidermis from the most superficial to the deepest are the stratum corneum, the stratum lucidum. This we only find in thick skin. Stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, stratum basale is the deepest layer. So the stratum corneum is the most superficial. It's a top layer of dead keratinized cells. So this layer, it's just dead cells that are full of this protein keratin. It provides physical defense from the outside. They're flattened cells, there's no nuclei, they're completely dead. But they are highly protective due to that keratin that is within them. The stratum lucidum is another layer of dead keratinized cells. You can see it is slightly clearer is what it means in Latin. So the nuclei and the organelles are no longer visible. These cells are completely degraded. They are just full of keratin. So this is only found in thick skin. We don't find this layer in thin skin. Then we get to the stratum granulosum. It's named for visible granules. This is 3 to 5 cell layers thick. The cells are relatively flattened by this point. Deep to that is the stratum spinosum. That means spiny layer. There are many cell layers. These cells are not yet flattened. They are a bit more cuboidal in shape. There are keratin fibers that are developing in these cells. So what's going on is the cell reproduction is happening down in the stratum basale, and these cells are slowly getting pushed upwards. As they get pushed upwards, they're being filled with keratin, and they basically are self-destructing by filling themselves with keratin and flattening out until they finally reach the very surface of your skin and they are sloughed and fall off. So our deepest layer is the stratum basale. This contains the youngest epithelial cells. So we have the young ones. Here we have one, it is going through mitosis down here. As they replicate, they are going to flatten, fill with keratin, and be dead by the time they get to lucidum and corneum. The stratum basale contains melanocytes. Melanocytes are the cells that give skin its coloration. That's where our pigmentation comes from. People with darker skin have the same number of melanocytes as people with lighter skin. The difference is in the concentration of pigment and how far these cellular projections stick out in between the other cells. So this layer is also referred to as the stratum germatividum. Honestly, I don't hear that term used very often, if at all. It's made of basal karyotype stem cells. So this stratum basale, we have stem cells, which should make sense because this layer must divide continually throughout your whole life. So because this is an epithelial tissue, it has a basement membrane. The basement membrane separates the dermis from the epidermis. It is made of a little bit of connective tissue. So your dermis, we're going to get these up first. So your dermis is quite a bit thicker than your epidermis. It averages 1 to 2 millimeters thick. Your dermis is covered with what we call dermal papillae. That is this wavy pattern. It binds your epidermis, so this layer here is super tough. Very easy, very hard to cut through your epidermis. You need something like a steel blade or a very sharp rock before you're going to cut the epidermis. It generally doesn't just happen. So your dermis is made of irregular, dense connective tissue. It contains muscle cells. It contains your erector pili muscles. It contains nerve cell processes. So there are nerve cells that are going to be up in your dermis. There are blood vessels in your dermis. There are hair follicles in your dermis. And you have glands, sweat glands, and sebaceous glands, oil glands in your dermis. Deep to the dermis is what we call the subcutaneous layer, also known as the hypodermis. Hypo for below, so hypothermia, below temperature, hypodermis, below dermis. So your subcutaneous layer is made of loose connective tissue with some adipose tissue. So here we've got an example of adipose tissue. Here we have example of loose connective tissue. It is a mix of these two tissue types with vascular tissue running through. Your subcutaneous layer is insulative. That adipose tissue has good thermal insulation. Your subcutaneous layer houses major blood vessels. All of your major blood vessels are going to be housed in the subcutaneous layer if they are going to be close to your skin. Within, so now we're going to talk about two accessory structures to the integumentary system, your hair and your nails. So we're going to start with hair. So you probably know hair has a hair follicle. You probably pulled out one or two in your lifetime. So your hair all is connected to an erector pili muscle. You know what the original purpose of that was if you have a dog or a cat and you see them when their hair stands up on end. That used to be a useful way to stay warm or to display toughness and size. It's kind of pointless on humans today. It's vestigial. So your hair exists from the root to the surface of a follicle. The follicle surrounds the developing hair. Darkness is caused by melanin concentration. Red hair is caused by trichloroestrin. I may have butchered that. It will be associated with sebaceous glands. All of your hair follicles are going to have a sebaceous gland, a little oil gland, to lubricate the hair follicle. So all of your follicles are going to be associated with a sebaceous gland. Then we're going to get to your nails. So your nails are just structures that are again made of the protein keratin. So this whole nail plate is just made of keratin proteins, made out of amino acids. That's all that is. The lunella, which is this lighter portion at the tip of your nail, that is the most actively growing region. You're probably aware, if you've ever damaged a nail like I have recently, that it grows from this end out. So that is going to complete the notes for the integumentary system. I am going to be posting these slides at the same time that I post this video, so if you want to go through and get the notes from the slides themselves, that probably is a little bit easier. Tomorrow I'm going to give you a little bit more just bookwork. You are not going to have a video tomorrow. When we are back, I'm expecting that we are going to be doing lab every single day that I have you next week, and probably for a bit after that. I'm honestly unsure at this point if we are going to get a test into this marking period or not. I'd like to have a lab practical part on that test, and I've not showed you enough tissues to give you that part of the exam yet. But that's my problem, not yours, so thanks. Have a good day.